Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks. Welcome back to the show. My name is Avrum Rosensweig, and I'm delighted to be here with you. I remind my listeners and viewers that the reasoning behind this podcast, why it exists, is to encourage people to remember that the world in which we share is actually a very, very beautiful place, and that over the last 6,000 years or 2 billion, whatever your religious predilection is, we've accomplished a lot. We've done incredible things, creative things, things of medicine, things of nutrition, cutting back on hunger around the world, more health in all the continents. And I think it's incumbent upon us to mention these things, to talk about them, to pat ourselves on the back. And that is the reason that I do the Avrum Rosensweig Show. And I would ask you, as you listen to the show, and at the end of it, take stock of what we've accomplished, what we will accomplish here during the show with our guest, and I'll introduce him in a moment, and take out of that what you can for yourself. Find your zone, find your purpose and meaning, make your life something very, very special, because we're here for a short time, man. We're not here for a long time. And we have to do our very best in this period that we share this planet Earth. It is all of ours. And as individuals, we have gifts within, and we have to actualize those as best as we can. Now, I would like to take this moment, a very somber moment, to remember the hostages in Gaza, those who are still there, those who have been released, and certainly on the minds and hearts of everybody, Jews everywhere and good people all over, is the Bezos family. Yarden is the father at 34. God bless him. He should have a long life and find happiness. His wife, Shiri, came back in a body bag. She was 32 years old. And their little ones, Ariel, 4, and Kfir, under 1 year old. They were actually murdered in 2023. And I want to take a moment. I want to show their picture, and if we can take a minute of silence in their memory, and please use your energy towards the enhancement and the strengthening of the Jewish people in the world in which we share. God bless your souls. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the show once again. I am delighted to tell you that my guest today is one of Canada's only astronauts, Mr. Henry Wolfond. How are you, Henry?
I'm good. How are you, Avrum?
I'm great, man. How does it feel to be called that?
I have to be honest, I have some ambivalence about it because unlike the real astronauts who I grew up admiring as a child, the John Glenns and the Neil Armstrongs and the Alan Shepards who devoted their lives to that career and were pioneers in space travel, I'm just the schmuck who bought a ticket to go on a suborbital mission. So I can tell you the experience was incredible in terms of the label. I'm not sure. I
hear you. Listen, it's an honor for me to call you that, and I understand why you might be hesitant. But as you are interviewed on Breakfast Television, Sid Cicero said to you, "You're one of few people, one of the few Canadians who have ever accomplished what you've accomplished." Mm-hmm. So let me give a bit of an intro here so people have a better understanding of who you are. On November 22nd, 2024. Henry Wolfond rode in a Jeff Bezos New Shepard rocket 107 kilometers above the Earth. And he did so not only for the fascination of being in space, because the man loves aviation, he loves rocket ships, but also as a peace mission. And that's a beautiful component to this story today. Upon return, Henry Wolfond, in tears, he said, "We are all one people, We're all on this fragile, small planet. It is amazing. These are very, very special moments in your own personal history, the history of the Jewish people, and what is happening around the world today. Now, you are a business person, CEO of Bayshore Capital. You're also the chairperson of Confronting Antisemitism, a committee of the United Jewish Appeal, Jewish Federation of Greater Toronto. Now, what was fascinating to me when I studied up on this journey that you took, 12-minute journey, is that indeed it's far more than 12 minutes, because essentially what you have done is you brought all the components of your life together, right? Within this trip, I would argue, of course, your family was on your mind. When you came back, you said, the next time I do this, I'm going to take my wife with me. Very nice.
I'm not sure that she's signed on for that. I've talked
about
her since. I talked about it with her since, and she's, I think you really have to have a passion and a desire and drive to do it. It's not without risk and anxiety attached to it, but certainly one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had.
Yeah, so let's talk about this experience. Firstly, how did it come to your mind that you wanted to do this?
As a kid growing up in the 1960s, it was just the most exciting, the race to the moon, the space program, I'm including the Gemini program leading up to the Apollo missions, was just the most exciting part of my life. And it was probably because it was the most exciting part of my dad's life. And I just have, those memories, those early memories that you have as a child, they're just distinct and isolated. It's not like a continuum, but it stands out. And just sitting in front of that black and white TV and Walter Cronkite's commentary, yes, and the countdown, and, it's watching those launches. We were in Florida on a family vacation, Christmas in 1968, when Apollo 8 was orbiting the moon, and I was standing on the beach with my dad, and he was just marveling at it. And it's something I grew up wanting to do. I carried that aspiration into high school. I became a pilot while I was finishing high school and had aspiration to go into the Air Force, but I didn't have 20/20 vision, unfortunately. And that was a hard line that was kind of a minimum physical requirement. So I pursued other things. I continued to have an interest and fascination with space exploration and the science of space. And when I saw William Shatner took this same trip in 2021, in October 2021, almost a little over 2 years before I did.
At 90 years
old.
When
he came back and when he described it, I just started the wheels in motion and said, this is something I want to do. And I'm lucky enough to be in a position to pursue it.
You and I share a couple of things. One of which is a passion for the Jewish community in the world in which we share, as I said before. But I was born in Kitchener, Ontario, which is about an hour. Nowadays, it's probably a bit more, an hour and a half because of the traffic.
It's only about 15 minutes from where I was born.
Right. And you were born in Guelph, Ontario. Mm-hmm. We used to go visit Guelph quite often. There was a rabbi mm-hmm. there, Rabbi Mayerovich. I don't know if you remember him.
Yep. I remember Rabbi Mayerovich. I was friends with his son, Elliot.
That's right.
I haven't kept track of Elliot. I don't know where he is now.
You can find him online. I'm not sure if he's here or in Israel, but I remember too when Apollo 11 landed on the moon. My father had actually returned to university in the summer times, and we were driving to London, Ontario. He was at Western, and I remember us stopping at a store, and there was a small TV in that store. And I was mesmerized, like you, by what was about to happen. The idea that we humankind, Henry, could take this ship, right, and from the Earth 250,000 miles to the moon and then land on the moon, to me was absolutely fascinating. What is that, or what was that is so mesmerizing to you?
I think it's just the spirit of and curiosity of the human species to explore as you said earlier, whether we've been here for 6,000 years or I think since the
Billions.
evolution of Homo sapiens around 300,000, what moved us out of sub-Saharan Africa as a species to populate the entire planet? It's a curiosity and a drive to climb the highest mountain, to aspire to explore the furthest destination. What's fascinating looking back at, the fact that man landed on the moon in July of 1969 is that the magnitude of the engineering and the computations and what went into it, using rudimentary by today's standards. Maybe it was beyond slide rules, but just that they could accomplish that feat. And we're some almost 56 years later, just now getting back there. That we haven't, we kind of checked that box and then left in the early 70s. And it's now in this age of private space exploration with SpaceX and Blue Origin that humans are again venturing to another orb in the solar system, in the universe, back to the moon, and perhaps back to Mars. We'll see if that aspiration comes true within our lifetime. I think it probably will within our children's and grandchildren's. But I think it's just who we are as human beings. That
What was amazing to me is your short time on that flight, which was about 12 minutes, 13 minutes. And you talked about what most astronauts speak about, which is looking back at the world and seeing no demarcation lines, not seeing those things that divide us. You're a man who is very passionate about unifying the world, about stopping hatred as best as you can, and anti-Semitism. Tell us about that moment where you were in space and you look back at our globe and you saw this beautiful, beautiful blue planet that we share, that has been ours for thousands of years. What happened to you existentially from a spiritual point of view?
It's one of those experiences that's hard to describe. That you're experiencing something. We've all seen pictures of the Earth from outer space. We've all seen videos, but unless you kind of feel it in your being, see it with your eyes, it's very hard to describe. So you're not as far out in space as that moonrise shot, obviously, on Apollo 8, but you're seeing that the planet is not that big, and we're surrounded by space, by a void, and there's a very thin blue line that's quite distinct, and that's the atmosphere that protects all of us. This planet is our spaceship, and that's not a metaphor that I've created, and also the perspective. I prepared myself with that. I've read Carl Sagan's books and other astronauts who kind of inspired me with that message. When I first signed up to undertake this, it was for my own personal adventure. As the date approached, and in the aftermath of the horrific attack on October 7th, 2023, And my taking on the role as chairing the Confronting Antisemitism Committee, I really felt I needed to intertwine my mission in the community and in Canada in confronting anti-Semitism, confronting hate, addressing it, shining a spotlight on it with the personal adventure of going to space. And I'm not sure if that's a round peg in a square hole, but it certainly was moving for me. And I wasn't expecting to be as emotional as I was when I came back, and I still trying to figure that out. Was it because it was just so much adrenaline and emotion packed into that tight 11, 12-minute span of time? Or was it that I had looked forward to this for so long or fantasized about it since I was a child and now it was over? But it was incredibly moving and profound. The earth is gorgeous, and you don't see those divisions, and you don't see the ideologies and religion and nationalities that divide us. But then you come back and it's like, all of those things are still here. There are still people that hate Jews. There's hatred abounds and disregard for the environment, and all of the problems we have here persist. There's a part of me that's like, I just want to stay off the planet and look at it.
Yeah. You were asked how long you would like to be up there ultimately, and you said, "Yeah, you'd be good for weeks." When you came back, I've stood in front of beautiful mountains in the world. Thank God, I have been privy to some very, very special things through my work at Via Hafta, through humanitarian work around the world in Zimbabwe and Guyana, here in Toronto, and I've been privy to some really, really, I think, very spiritual, holy things, and it's changed me. It's changed me. I usually walk away from them feeling a little bit different than I did before, perhaps a little bit more insightful, feeling a little bit more spirited about being part of this world. Are you feeling differently now that you've taken this trip, which is so unique to so few?
Absolutely. And it's almost like you were reading my mind. I have said to other people, like, it's analogous. I've been to Africa a few times, and I've been to urban parts of Africa. I've been to Ethiopia a couple of times on UJ kind of trips where we were meeting with Falasha and Falash Mora and bringing them to Israel. But I compare it to, like, you can watch David Attenborough's Planet Earth.
Yes.
Spectacular photography, but unless you've been on safari, and I've had a couple of times I've seen kills, there is nothing. You can't capture what you feel just by watching it on TV or watching it on an IMAX movie screen. It's moving and it's impactful, and it's just incredible to see that, predator prey, the nature, doing its thing. And I would compare this to that, but even on an even higher level. And it's not that I distinguish it because I'm one of fewer than 700 people who have actually been off the planet, but it's unlike anything I've ever experienced before. And again, it's hard to describe, and I'll do my best. It's the blackness of space it's like a translucence. What's between you and it is just clear void. Doesn't look black out there. It's not like looking into a night sky where you see stars. It's not dark. It's morning. The earth is creating a lot of light. The sun is this bright white light. The capsule is designed so you get the 360-degree perspective. It rotates at 180 degrees a minute. So in the 4 minutes that you're weightless in space, you'll get around a couple of times to see in different directions. But in many ways, it's a lot of things were just unexpected. It was unexpected how profound the feeling I would get from taking in that view and being weightless, and just marvelous.
Does God come into play here?
I'm not a religious person,
Yes.
so if there was a prayer I would have said, it would just be Shehechianu.
Yes.
And I've said this before. You're in the capsule about 30 minutes before launch, so you have this buildup as the countdown is going down. And I wanted to be mindful of my past and my family's history. With my grandchildren, 5 generations of my family have been here. There's an irony in my existence and my having the good fortune to be able to do this, because I would not be here. You probably wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the anti-Semitism that drove our grandparents and great-grandparents out of Europe. They had to escape the hatred that was there, the possibility of being murdered just for being Jewish. And that led me to have the opportunity of a lifetime to carry out this mission and combine it with the ongoing but emerging fight against anti-Semitism that we face today. And you mentioned the Bezos family at the beginning of this, and yeah, I mean that's just crushed me in a way, because seeing families and children come out and celebrate the delivery of children in coffins back to their family, back to their country, it's like, where is the humanity in this? Where, I may be getting off topic, but where is there a partner for peace in Israel and in the Middle East if this is the sentiment of a large part of the population?
What's really fascinating about how you went about your trip, it was very unselfish of you. It wasn't just, okay, what can Henry Wolfond accomplish through this? You were actually given a sort of flight bag whereby you were allowed to carry 3 pounds worth of anything you pretty much wanted to take up into space. Now, we viewers are somewhat familiar with this because I believe the Challenger that exploded, there was a woman on there, a Jewish woman, who carried, I believe she carried with her a small Torah. And you can tell me if I'm correct on that or not. Your flight bag carried something incredibly important. Walk us through what you put in that bag and why.
I wanted to, as I said, have memories or carry with me my legacy. I had pictures of my grandparents from the 1920s before they got married, about 10 years after they arrived in this country, pictures of my parents at their wedding, myself and Rochelle at our wedding, pictures of my children and grandchildren. And in addition, I took, like 50, bring them home pins and 20 of the bring them home dog tags that I'm going to give you a pin or a dog tag or something, because I'm giving them to people in the community who would find meaning in it. And it comes with a certificate that says flown in space. I took my grandchildren each gave me something that was special to them. My grandson Corey is in grade 6. I went to speak to his class before I went, so each of them gave me a postcard or something significant that came back with a certificate that it had been flown in space. But it was very important to me to take things that reminded me of the added purpose I was taking to this mission, which is anti-Semitism, history of the Jewish people.
Where's that bag now and the contents?
It's in another room. I have given away a number of the pins and things, but it's here at home with me.
It must be very special.
Yeah.
You know, I'm curious because you are so aware of the beauty that exists in our world. And you have been privy to that through your trips, as you mentioned, and exposure to other things through the Jewish community and through business and otherwise. Yet by the same token, you're also very conscious of the hatred that exists, not only anti-Semitism, but racism. So when you were up in space, were you conscious of both? Were you excited about the potential of humankind because of what you saw and felt? Were you disappointed knowing that you were going to come back to the same hatred that you left? Or was it a whole melange of those things?
Firstly, as you said, it's the entire experience is 12 minutes. So I went into this making sure I would be very mindful of taking in that perspective. So I was very optimistic when I was there. I was in awe. I was beaming at the possibility. And, it's a little bit Pollyanna, right? It's hatred, violence, war has existed as long as humans have existed.
Yes.
So this is just the nature of our species. I would like to be. I would like to see a future in which more and more people, this kind of experience becomes accessible. I talk about it like you said, you've been to Zimbabwe and you've been to parts of Africa. I would like it to be like, well, this would be an option to doing that in terms of cost, in terms of access, in terms of comfort and safety. And, that might not be the case in our children's lifetime, but I think the more people that are able to experience this and understand how we're all in this together, we all have a stake in it. When I wrote the op-ed that was in the Toronto Star, and I thought about it, it's like even back in the 70s, in the height of the Cold War, the Russians and the Americans cooperated on the joint Soyuz program.
Yes, correct.
Like if there's just two of us on this planet and we depend on each other, your skill keeps me alive and my skill keeps you alive, whether we hate each other or not. We're going to cooperate, and that will lead to diminution of whatever animosity, whatever the foundation of that hatred is. So is it a bit of a dream? I know you and I share the same philosophy in that regard. I want a two-state solution. I want to see a Palestinian state and society have autonomy. At this point in time, though, I'm not optimistic.
Henry, you went up into space with a team of people.
Mhm.
And again, you had a very clear goal. One was to accomplish something that you've dreamt about since you're a little guy. And we all know what those dreams are like. They are so special. And when you actually do them, man, it's a moment that you remember for the rest of your life. They illuminate your soul.
Mhm.
But you weren't by yourself. And my question to you is, was this an individual flight, or was it indeed a team effort? And in terms of your goal of bringing a light to the anti-Semitism in the world, the hatred in the world, and trying to stymie it somewhat, was your team on board with that? And do you have a sense that you may have accomplished even a little bit of that goal?
I think the team was on board with that, but in answer to your earlier question, and I realized this, as we went through the training process and afterwards, everyone had their own purpose. Mark and Sharon Hagel are very invested in STEM education for young people and engaged in this Space Kids project. Emily Candrelli, she's an MIT engineer and scientist, and she's all about children's education. So each of the participants, I would say it was more in terms of how I approached it. I was doing what I was doing, and I think they had their combined purpose as well. So perhaps if it was a longer flight, if I was up there for a week, there would be more integration and cross-pollination of each other's mission. But in the short period of time that we had off the planet, I think everyone really focused on their own priorities.
Well, all right, let's dive into part B of my question. Do you sense whatsoever that you've made a dent into fighting anti-Semitism, fighting hatred?
A dent, maybe a small dent.
Yeah.
I've had people who are not part of the Jewish community call me and talk to me and say, they didn't realize that this was the problem, or they didn't realize when I would have a conversation with them how much pain we as a Jewish community are feeling to some extent by the silence of the people we grow up with and interact with, that they're not speaking out on our behalf. So to that end, I think it's shone a light on it and made people more aware of how the Jewish people are feeling right now. Has it turned someone's attitude towards Jewish people or affected anti-Semitism? Probably not. There's just a lot of work to do. I think just by shining a light on it, just by making people aware, I hope it makes a difference. I think one of the most important aspects of the mission to confront anti-Semitism, to put it back in the dark places where it will probably always reside, is just awareness and the values that we share. For me, the aftermath of October 7th has really changed a lot of things. I'm so much more conscious of my Jewishness. I used to, I work in business. I work on Bay Street. I go downtown to the office. I wasn't thinking in any way that there was any distinction between me and my Christian peers or Muslim peers or anyone else. We just did our things. But October 7th really kind of broke that for me. And I wake up and go to sleep feeling that I'm Jewish and I'm just different. And you start to think about, I don't think we're anywhere near, a lot of people will say, oh, maybe this is Germany in the 1930s. I think our institutions and the democracies, certainly in North America and most of the Western world, is, I would hope we're not going to see a return of the Nazis. But you start to think to yourself when you know, who would hide me in their basement or their attic?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not just local to you. I hear that from a lot of people. We're just so much more cognizant through little things, through little images about our Jewishness. I was talking to my friend Ellie Rubenstein, whom you know, who's a big macher in the Jewish community through March of the Living and through his congregation. And he would tell me such things as just going through the border sometimes is a scary thing to do, because the border has always been a perilous place for our ancestors in Europe, trying to go from one country to another, fleeing. About rising global anti-Semitism, it's been on the rise in many parts of the world, especially in Europe and the Middle East. According to the Anti-Defamation League, incidents of anti-Semitism, attacks, vandalism, and harassment have increased in recent years dramatically. In Canada, there's a huge uptick in terms of anti-Semitism. The 2020 audit of anti-Semitic incidents recorded a significant increase as well across our nation. Henry, let me ask you very succinctly, why are we, the Jewish people, hated so much?
I haven't been asked that question, so I haven't thought about how to answer that. And I don't want to answer it in the wrong way. I think there's a lot of ways to look at it. Christians believe that let's say we killed Jesus, or we rejected God's son, the Messiah. We've always, and in the Muslim world as well, we you know, the last word of God as spoken to Muhammad is not a belief that we share. So religion is a part of it. I think our envy, perhaps. We're the people of the book. We're literate. We educate ourselves. We invent things. We achieve, and we distinguish ourselves in terms of scientific accomplishment, literary accomplishment, business accomplishment, far beyond the 0.2% that we represent in the world's population. Is envy a factor? I honestly don't know. It wasn't a question I was prepared for. I almost want to ask you, because you've thought about it, what you think.
Right. So I've spoken to many people on this podcast, including Michal Cutler, Erwin Cutler's daughter, who's one of his most.
She's great.
She's magnificent, absolutely magnificent. I think one of the greatest points in my research on any guest was when I watched her deliver a speech at the United Nations. And I'll tell you, man, she had balls. Like, she stood in front of the members of that nation, the United Nations, and said, it is you who allowed for anti-Semitism right here in this room. It is you who allowed for a justification of Zionism being racism. And she didn't hold back, Henry, not for a moment. If somebody wants to watch a brilliant, brilliant speech, go to Michal Cutler at the United Nations. I was actually very intimidated before I interviewed her, because I thought, my God, this is a very tough Israeli woman. she was the sweetest, kindest human being, just
Mhm.
just full of delight and full of light. And of course, we all know her father, Irwin Cutler, who did
Yeah,
wonderful
I was
for our
gonna say
country
she's
and for the Jewish people. He's in, and I'm hoping to interview him. Well, he's not healthy, that healthy right now. But I've heard so many answers from so many different people. I heard an answer from Simeon Mammon, who husband is near Mammon, and he's been called up into the IDF 7 times since October 6th. He's 48 years old, and he lives up in Richmond Hill. He's a security guy by through his career, and he was an IDF soldier, and he wanted to go back and fight after October 7th. I said to her, I said, Simeon, tell me, why does anti-Semitism exist? Why are we so hated? You know what her response was? I don't care. She says, it doesn't interest me at all. She says, what interests me is strengthening the Jewish people. And I thought, yeah, good for you. But I have heard from others who have said, as you mentioned, as you alluded to, that that people are envious of us, that we stand for something very particular in the world, which is tikkun olam, which is illuminating the world, fixing it. People don't like that. They don't like folks like that. So there's anger toward us. But I want to go into something a little bit lighter, because what you have done is so beautiful. And I want to make sure that we highlight all the fascinating aspects of it. So first, the inevitable question that jumps into everybody's mind is, here's what you said about the flight itself. Someone asked you, Henry, what about the fear? And you said, you know what? It's in the corner of my mind. I think you can't imagine yourself sitting on 50 tons of a combination of liquid hydrogen, liquid oxygen, and other volatile chemicals that are going to propel this machine to an altitude beyond the atmosphere and not have a little bit of, what happens if there's a spark or something goes wrong? I'm a pachdan. I'm a frightened guy. Are you generally a courageous guy?
I think I'm 66 years old. I've done incredible things. I am I a courageous guy? I think it's a calculated risk. You can't experience it without sitting on that basically 50 tons of volatile propellant that could explode. So if your fear exceeds your desire, you're not going to do it. I'll tell you what was the biggest fear I had. Two of my children and two of my grandchildren were there, in a viewing stand watching it. So my biggest fear is if something goes wrong, I'm not going to feel it. It will be over in, a nanosecond, but my children and grandchildren might carry this trauma for the rest of their lives. But I didn't feel fear in that 30 minutes of counting down. There was a certain amount of anxious anticipation, but of course it's going to be in the back of your mind.
So the 30 minutes is up. There's a 10-second countdown.
It counts down for an hour at about T minus 30, maybe a little more than that. They call it the seventh crew member. There's 6 of us in the capsule. Her name's Sarah. She was incredible. She was with us through all our training. So she comes in, checks that everyone's secure in their harnesses, does sort of a last minute thumbs up, and then the capsule is sealed. So now we're all there and it's pretty quiet. No one's really having any conversation and everyone's sort of in their own state of preparation. I had a fantastic view out towards the Texas desert and the hills beyond. It was a perfect sunny day. And as I said, I brought the memories and imagination of my grandparents coming to Canada through Pier 21, and just focused on how fortunate I was to be able to do this. And as I said earlier, the irony of my very existence being attributable to the hatred that we've been discussing as a central part of this conversation. So yeah, I would say there wasn't a lot of fear. When you ask if I'm a courageous person, though, I'm scared shitless of going in the ocean.
Or bungee jumping. You don't like that.
A shark might get me.
It's interesting.
So there are things I'm afraid of, but I've been a pilot since I was 17 years old, so I'm getting close to 50 years as an aviator, and I'm quite passionate about that. And certainly focus on training and maintaining and continually building on my skills. So that might be something other people would be afraid of.
What's very interesting is that you've flown medvac, emergency health flights, as well as I believe you've flown some commercial flights. Is that correct?
Yeah, charter flights. I try to do the air ambulance stuff and the organ retrieval flights more often.
So Henry, so there's this countdown, and why I mentioned the countdown a few minutes ago is because I remember as a child, as a young person, that was the most exciting part. You'd be riveted to the television and go, oh, damn, another hour and a half till this thing takes off. And then it's 10, 9. And the fellow who would say it, he would be so clear and so focused on his task. And then all of these flames would come out from the bottom of the rocket as you experienced. So does your ship start to shake? And when it does, like, what's on your mind? Are you in the moment at every moment? Did you manage to stay there?
I did my best to stay there. When the countdown reaches, just share with you a little bit. So in the training, you go through about 20 simulations. They have a little simulator in the training room. Obviously, it doesn't move or anything. They simulate noise and what you're going to go through, how you should be in your seat, and there's an escape mechanism. So if anything goes wrong with the booster, the capsule itself will rocket off the top of it. And if that happens, there can be a very short, up to 18 Gs of force on your body. So while that is active, there's a light that indicates that. You have to be pretty rigid in your seat, your head back against the headrest and your arms holding these grips at the side of your seat. So there's nothing that will break, yes, like your neck or your arm. Where was I going with that? So you have an awareness. There's a screen that shows the countdown, also shows the velocity, altitude, and G-forces on the rocket. So the countdown goes to 0, but there's about 7 to 10 seconds from the time the engine lights until it's released to go. So in that 7 seconds, you see the flames outside the window. And you're trained to, wait the 7 seconds, and then it's released, and then you're going. And then it's like just a euphoric cheer. You're on your way, but you quickly accelerate. There's something called max Q, which is the point at which there's the maximum dynamic force on the rocket between the acceleration and the resistance of the ship. And that happens more or less within the first minute. You accelerate from 0 to about 4,000 kilometers an hour in about a minute and a half.
Wow.
And within 3 minutes, you go from light to dark, and you're in outer space. And then you're now traveling upward ballistically. There's a point, main engine cut off. And then about 10 seconds later, there's separation. At which point, when it separates, there's no longer the risk of getting injured by the escape mechanism taking over. And you can undo your harness, and now you float in space. And we had agreed as a crew that we were each going to have our own space and enjoy it, because we had seen videos of previous missions, and some of them were like throwing around footballs and really focused inside. And it's like you're supposed to be looking out there. Yeah. So we had all had the same thought, that we just wanted to spend as much time at the window as we could. So we did a little group photo, weightless, and then sort of went to our own stations beside our seats. You asked me, there's a certain mindfulness in every second. It's hard to string them all together, because there's a lot going on. There's a lot of adrenaline,
to say the least.
Your heart is racing to a large degree. And then after 3.5 minutes floating, you're back in your seat and you're falling back to Earth. It's amazing. I can't Henry, recommend it highly enough to anyone who has the means and desire to do this. It's should be at the top of their list.
Henry, you explained the going up, the ascent. Mm-hmm. Was the descent fascinating as well?
Interestingly enough, you experience more G-forces on the descent than you do on the ascent. Because in the ascent, even though you're going, the acceleration is more gradual. So you get about 3.5 G's. A G is the force of gravity on Earth.
Yes.
On the ascent, and about 5.5 on the descent. So if you think of it, and this is how they describe it, if you drop a stone onto the surface of water, the water being the atmosphere, it will hit the water and decelerate quite quickly, and then it will slowly descend to the bottom of the pond. So they use that. So when you come back and hit the atmosphere, the G-forces very quickly increase from nothing to about 5.5. So you really feel you're pressed back into your seat. You can feel the skin in your face peeling, pulling back.
And when the parachutes go up, is there a pull?
Relief.
It is a relief? It is?
Oh, yeah. Because that's the last thing you have to be. It's like, okay, the rocket didn't blow up.
We're good.
We didn't get stuck up there. We're on our way back down. Just one more thing.
And what was impact like? What was impact like?
Not as harsh as it looks on video. So there are thrusters on the bottom of the capsule that I guess they're on some kind of a LiDAR or something. When it gets close to the ground, those fire. Yes. So the impact, would be like a solid landing in an airplane. Mm-hmm. Nothing. But it did kick up. It kicks up a lot of dust.
And when the doors open and you walked out, do you remember your first thought? Do you remember what you were feeling?
I wanted to like just do it again. I
You're ready to
remember
go.
thinking, like, this was like, as the most incredible experience I've ever had, and I couldn't wait to repeat it.
Could you express it to your wife, to your family? Could you say this is what happened? Or were you just in those moments we get very quiet because our feelings and thoughts are so personal, right?
I uh, I think I expressed it pretty well to my wife, to my kids. I mean, it was pretty neat. So, your significant other, there's two viewing locations. So Rochelle was, I'll send you some pictures if you want afterward. I don't know if you're doing any editing. The plus ones were on the back of pickup trucks, much closer to the launch site than the viewing stand for the rest of the family. So there's great pictures of Rochelle, like just so anxiously looking up and watching. So she was in tears, happy to see me. We gave each other a big hug. It was quite an amazing moment. But then the rest of the family is at a different viewing station, and then after doing some pictures in front of the vehicle, they drive you back to this luncheon where you meet everyone else. So as soon as I saw my kids and grandchildren, they all rushed towards me, hugged me, and yeah, it's the best hug I ever got from my two granddaughters and my son and my daughter
Oh my
Serena.
gosh. Before you went, did you say to your wife, honey, are you okay with me doing this?
I don't know if I ever said. Rochelle and I talk about this quite a bit.
Yes.
So as I said, I have been flying for almost 50 years. Rochelle and I have been married 46 years. So when we were dating, I was already a pilot. And we go out with other couples and they would say, oh yeah, he was a private pilot, but I told them if we were getting married, he had to give it up.
Really?
So Rochelle knows me well enough to know that would probably have been a deal breaker. I'm a pretty independent, adventurous type of person. So
Those who know you know you.
She wouldn't have imposed a you can't do this
Yeah. Yeah.
on me. So she was quite excited. She was quite supportive. She's supportive of most of my crazy
Your craziness.
ideas.
Was your mom cool with it?
Yeah,
She was.
my mom watched it. There's a great video that my sister-in-law took. So Rochelle's dad is 94. He's an Auschwitz survivor, I think. And this was one of the things I took a picture of him. He was lying on the beach in Florida, and you can see his tattoo. But there's a couple of great videos that I saw afterwards that were just taken on iPhone cameras. And one is of Rochelle's dad watching the launch. The other one, which I really love, is in my grandson Corey's grade 6 class. His whole class, and I took things for each of them, was watching the launch. So they didn't show any of the kids' faces, but the teacher took a video from behind Corey, and just to see how excited he was, and then them cheering was
Wow.
pretty incredible.
Well, listen, I want to really dig deeply to see your education and your understanding of things having to do with space travel and NASA. So I have a few questions that I want to ask, and let's see how you do in this quiz. You ready, Henry?
Uh-oh. Okay.
Yeah, it's not difficult. Which Apollo mission was the first to successfully land humans on the moon? 11, 12, 13, or 15?
Well, 11, 12, and 15 all landed on the moon.
Very
11
good.
was the first.
And 13, man, that was a great movie, wasn't it? Yeah.
You know, there's a fabulous, I think it's on Netflix, documentary,
I saw
not
it.
the Tom Hanks movie. It's better than the Tom Hanks movie in many
Phenomenal.
ways because it's the actual people. Have you seen it?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah,
Unbelievable.
I mean, it was
You know,
intense.
it's incredible. I was thinking about it before when you mentioned about, we're talking about how many years ago was that? 30, 45, 50 years ago. And the technology that they had was nowhere near, not as close to what we have today. And they had to develop some sort of filter, a breathing mechanism. And essentially what they did through the folks on Earth at NASA and those in the capsule, they developed through some cardboard boxes and
Well, that was captured. I think they dramatized that better in the Hollywood movie. But you just look back on that, and when astronauts go to the International Space Station now, and they go on SpaceX's Crew Dragon, everything, the docking with the space station, it's autonomously controlled by computers and sensors and things. Apollo 13, that like they were piloting this thing, figuring everything out. They had hundreds of switches in the capsule, and so many things that were not automated, and that these were certainly the elite of aviators, of astronauts, the miracle of their survival, Apollo 13 specifically, but all of the Apollo missions or space missions at that time, just in retrospect, is astounding.
even Apollo 11's landing, right?
Yeah, Neil Armstrong had to adjust at the end because they were
out of gas,
headed for a rock or a crater.
Crazy stuff. Okay, second question. So far, you're 100%.
Okay.
Which spacecraft carried the astronauts to the moon during Apollo 11? Lunar module, command module, space shuttle, or Saturn V rocket?
Sorry, carried them to the surface?
Yes, carried the astronauts to the moon during, which spacecraft carried the astronauts to the moon during Apollo 11?
The LEM, the Lunar Excursion Module, the Eagle.
Right. The Eagle has landed, right? Who is the second person to walk on the moon following Neil Armstrong? John Glenn, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, or Gus Grissom?
You don't even have to make that a multiple choice. It was Buzz Aldrin.
How did you feel about the guy who went up there but never landed, never walked on the moon?
Michael Collins?
Yeah, Michael Collins.
How did I feel about him?
The question really is, I've always thought to myself, oh shit, like you're moments away from the moon, yet you don't get a chance to walk on it.
I think I don't know that think of it also as like he had a few hours of being alone and in solitude, orbiting the moon, seeing the Earth rise, and just having that solace, silence. I don't know. I understand from talking to people in the astronaut community that like he certainly had no regrets that he wasn't the one that went on the moon, and felt he was obviously had a lot of responsibility and was critical to the success of the whole mission.
And it would seem to me that you relate to him more so than you would Neil Armstrong.
Why would that? Why is that?
Well, you talk about the solitude, like what I'm gleaning from our discussion today. You want more time up there. When we were asked why in another interview, why, you said just the idea of watching the Earth.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I think I don't relate to him more than Neil Armstrong. I mean, certainly Neil Armstrong is the name that will be remembered for all time as the first human to set foot on the moon. But I think given the choice, I'd want to be Neil Armstrong rather than Michael Collins. But I don't think that I would regret either experience.
Yeah. So, Henry, I've been playing around with artificial intelligence for the last number of months, and I've asked it to write a poem about my guests, and I've done so. Some people have really liked it. I had Bob Ray I interviewed in Canada's ambassador to the United Nations, was not a big fan of it, but there's other people who actually had tears in their eyes. So this is called Ode to Henry Wolfond, and it's written by artificial intelligence. Here we go. In the heart of Toronto, a dream took flight. Henry Wolfond soared, reaching new heights. A child of wonder with eyes on the stars, gazing at Gemini, Apollo, and Mars. From the flicker of screens, a vision was born in the year of 68, a future to adorn. A boy in the theater in awe of the tale of space-bound voyages of ships that would sail. Through space shuttles, rockets, and moons' distant glow, he dreamed of the stars where few dare to go. The missions, the moments, like jewels in the sky, ignited a fire, a spark that would fly. Fast forward the years, and Henry stood tall, a leader, a visionary, answering the call. From Bayshore's boardrooms to missions of peace, he conquered new heights as dreams never cease. A rocket to the heavens, 107 kilometers high. A Canadian astronaut carving paths in the sky. With the UJA, he fights to confront the night. Anti-Semitism shadow he brings to the light. Yet in his heart, the child still resides, the boy who once watched with wide open eyes. To the moon, to the stars, to the unknown we fly. For Henry Wolfond, no dream is too high.
Wow, I love it. And you have to send it to me, email it to me, but with the prompt, email it to me with the prompt that you put in to get that output. Because I play around with AI all the time, and it's all about, okay, I got to change the input a little bit to get a little bit better result, because it's truly garbage in, garbage out, and you did a magnificent job. Whatever you did to set that up.
Thank you so much.
Very,
ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank Henry Wolfond for being my guest today. I must tell you that one of the questions I asked you, were you always in the moment? You said mostly. One tries to. I was always in the moment during this interview. I really was. I'm just completely mesmerized by what you've accomplished. Really. And you said you're one of 700 people who have ever gone outside of the Earth's atmosphere. I wanted to ask you a question, my final question to you. Of the 700,
679.
Of the 679, I knew that. Is there something about your flight that was different than everybody else's?
Other than the fact that I was on it, it's hard to answer that question. I mean, it's I think we experience the world as solipsists. We're, I can't discern what other people who have experienced it before me. I have to imagine that the Yuri Gagarins and John Glenn's, the first humans to orbit the Earth, had an experience beyond anything I had. And of course, the astronauts who either orbited the moon, landed on the moon, stood on the moon. So
Have you met any
I
of
don't
them?
know. I certainly had an experience that is incomparable to almost anything else.
Have you met any of the men who've landed on the moon?
I have. I recently, and I've met him a couple of times, Charlie Duke, who was on Apollo 16, is still around and on the speaking circuit. So I've gone to a couple of space conferences and had a chance to.
Were you in awe of him?
I'm. It's interesting that you asked that because he's 89 now. Yeah, I think he's had an experience that obviously only a handful, 12 people who've ever walked the earth have had the opportunity to share. So to be able to talk to someone who was standing there and doing that, yeah, I mean that's pretty awesome. I don't know. Have you spoken to anyone else who's done anything like this?
No, I'm in absolute awe of you, Henry.
Well, Avrum, you have done tremendous things, and just
Thank
with
you.
your koach and your spirit to start Verhafta
Thank you.
to see the need for something. As I said, I've been out on the van before, and I'm a great supporter of
Thank you.
the cause. So kol hakavod to you.
Kol hakavod to you, and I appreciate you saying that very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to conclude the show by reminding people that this show is all about finding your own personal, what we call it in Hebrew, matana, your own personal gift. It's looking deeply inside of yourself and trying to determine, okay, why was I put on this earth? What's my function here? What am I great at? What am I incredible at? What's my passion? You know, is it indeed flying to the moon and walking on it? Is it writing a beautiful composition? Is it being a brilliant accountant? And I say that with all seriousness. Everybody has their own personal gift. And the idea in life, as far as I see it, is to actualize that. So please take what you can out of this interview with Henry Wolfond and ask yourself, how can I do this in my life? Something that makes sense to me. That's something where I have the means to accomplish it in order to make myself the best person I can possibly be, to make the world the best that it can possibly be. In our case, because of our Jewishness, to make our people in Israel as strong as it can be. I want to conclude the show in the way that I began. We are all familiar with the Bezos story, and it's a harrowing story. It's one of those things that keeps us all up at night and brings tears to our eyes. And we can only wish through their time on this earth that their neshamas, that their souls will remind us of the potential that we have as humankind, not to do these awful things, but to do the beautiful things that are in front of us. So thank you so much for joining us. Henry, thank you for being my guest. I'm really, really grateful. Very grateful.
Thanks, Avram.
And I will conclude the show by posting the picture one more time of the Bezos family. And if we can all sort of stay here for 30 seconds, and then we will end the show. Thank you for joining me.